notes up from the Phrygian, 2 modal half steps up, which would be the third scale degree, a minor third. If we go from the Lydian, which is a major mode, we land in the ocean because we're going 3 notes up or a minor third distance. That would be a YX plus modal range or landing us in the Mixolydian Ocean. So it's going to be a 4 to a 4.5 modal range, 3 notes away from the Lydian, 1.5 modal half steps, which would be 2.5 scale degrees, or in essence, the third, meaning it would be a minor third. So it would be an XA modal range. If we start on the Mixolydian, it's going to land us on the ocean because Mixolydian is a major mode. 5 to a 5.6 modal range. It would be going 3 notes up from the Mixolydian, 1.5 modal half steps, which would be 2.5 scale degrees, or in other words, 3, because we don't have 0.5s on the scale degrees. So an AI modal range, starting from the Aeolian back to the minor scale, that would be a 6-1 modal range. So we would be going 3 notes up from the Aeolian, second modal half step, which would be the third scale degree, a minor third. Similarly, the Locrian is kind of like a minor mode, but it has a flat 5 in D modal range, 7-2 modal range, 3 notes up from the Locrian, second modal half step. All right, so let's go to the next one. If we go 4 notes up, that would be a major third distance. We call that mint from the color. It looks very similar from color, but it's slightly different if you train your eyes to see the difference there. We have an IP modal range, so that would be the Ionian to the Phrygian, a 1-3 modal range, meaning if you go 4 modal half steps up from the Ionian, it would be the second modal half step from there, which would be the third scale degree or a major third. From the Dorian, a minor mode, going 4 steps up, a major third will land us in the ocean. So we go from the Dorian to the Lydian plus or the Lydian Ocean. So it's going to be a 2 to a 4.5 modal range, or we went up 4 notes from the Dorian to a 2.5 modal half steps, which would be a 3.5 from a scale degree, or in other words, a third. So we have from the Phrygian, also a minor mode. So it's going to land us in the ocean. So it's going to be a Phrygian, a PX modal range, landing us in the Mixolydian Ocean. It would be 3 to a 5.5. We're going 4 notes up from the Phrygian, and that would be 2.5 modal half steps, which would be 3.5 scale degrees, or a third, a major third. From the Lydian, Lydian is a major mode, so going 4 up, a major third, will land us on a continent. We're good. So that's going to be a YA modal range, a 4-6 modal range, or we go 4 notes up from the Lydian, second modal half step, which would be a third scale degree, a major third. From the Mixolydian, a major mode, we should be good, landing on a continent. Be an XN modal range, a 5-7 modal range, going 4 notes up from the Mixolydian node, second modal half step, which would be a third scale degree. That would be a major third from the Mixolydian. Aeolian, minor mode, going a major third up will land us in the ocean. It's going to be an AI plus modal range, landing us in the Ionian Ocean, a 6 to a 1.5. It's going to be 4 notes up from the Aeolian, 2.5 modal half steps, which would be 3.5 scale degrees. So, and from the Locrian, kind of like a minor, so the 4 note away major third is going to land us in the ocean. That would be an ND plus modal range, landing us in the Dorian Ocean, a 7 to a 2.5. That's going to be 4 notes up from the Locrian, 2.5 modal half steps, 3.5 then from the scale degrees, which would be a third or major third away from the crazy Locrian. What if we go 5 up? So if we go 5 up, we're going to call all of these from a color standpoint aqua. So if I go 5 up, that's the perfect fourth, which is fairly stable and will land us on a continent if we do it from almost any of the starting points. So from an Ionian, IY lands us on the continent of Lydian, a 1-4 modal range. That would be a 5 notes away from the Ionian node, third modal half step, which would be a 4th scale degree, which would be a perfect 4th. That would be a Dorian. It's going to land us on a continent. We're good. A DX modal range lands us on the Mixolydian continent. It's going to be a 2-5 modal range, meaning if we go 5 up, 5 half steps up from the Dorian, it would be 3 modal half steps up, or 4th scale degree, a perfect 4th. We're good on the Phrygian. It'll land us PA, landing us on the Aeolian continent. 3-6 modal range, going 5 up from the Phrygian would be 3 modal half steps up, or 4th scale degree, a perfect 4th. But the Lydian causes us a problem. This is why the Lydian is is almost as crazy as the Locrian, but nobody knows about it because they hang out with the cool people. So like they cover it up. It's like the mainstream media, they cover it up even though it's crazy. So that's going to be a Y to an A plus modal range. And so we land in the Aeolian Ocean. So it's going to be a 4 to a 6.5. So it's going to be 5 notes away from the Lydian node. That should be a 2.5, not a 2.2, but 2.5, 2.5. Okay. So then on the Mixolydian, we're good. That would be an XI modal range, a 5-1 modal range, landing us on the Ionian Ocean. If we go from the Mixolydian up 5 from the Mixolydian would be 3 modal half steps, which would be 4 scale degrees or a perfect fourth away. Good from the Aeolian, an AD modal range lands us on the Dorian continent. So that'd be a 6-2 modal range. If we go 5 steps up, 5 half steps from the Aeolian node, it would be 3 modal half steps, which would be a 4th scale degree, perfect 4th. And if we go on the Locrian, we're even good. That would be an NP modal range, landing us on the Phrygian, a 7-3 modal range, going up 5 notes from the Locrian node would be 3 modal half steps from there, which would be a 4th scale degree, which would still be a perfect 4th from a scale degree standpoint. Let's go to the next one. Let's say we go 6. 6 is the crazy distance. It's electric sky. Watch out, you'll get electrocuted in the electric sky with a 6-note distance. That's the tritone. So if you go from the most of these are going to land you in the ocean, right? Because 6 notes away is a very sharp sound, right? So we're going to say it's going to be an IY plus modal range, meaning it's going to land us in the Lydian Ocean. That would be a 1 to a 4.5 modal range, meaning if I go 6 notes up from the Ionian, it's going to be a 3.5 modal half steps up, which would be a 4.5 from a scale degree, which we don't have 0.5, so it would be a 6. Or it would be a 5, a flat 5. Yeah, okay. If we go to a DX modal range, it's going to go from the Dorian, it's going to land us in the Mixolydian Ocean. DX plus, that's going to be a 2 to a 2.5. So if I start on the Dorian and I go up 6, then from the Dorian, it's going to be 3.5 modal half steps up, which would be 4.5 from a scale degree standpoint. So then if I start on the Phrygian, once again, it lands us in the ocean. It's going to be a PA+, or landing us in the Aeolian Ocean, which would be a 3 to a 6.5 modal range. If I go 6 notes up from the Phrygian, it would be a 3.5, then 3.5 modal half steps would be a 4.5 scale degree if we had 0.5s on the scale degrees. So then Lydian is the one that fits. Again, this is where the Lydian is crazy. So we land on a continent if you go 6 up from the Lydian. That would be a YN modal range or a 4-7 modal range. In other words, if I go 6 notes up from the Lydian, it would be 3 modal half steps up and I'd land on the Locrian continent, right? So that's the weird one. And it's also weird because usually you call it a flat 5, but no, this is an augmented 4th. Okay, so then we have an XI. So if I start on the Mixolydian, we'd have a range of an XI plus, or landing in the Ionian Ocean. That would be a 5 to a 1.5 modal range. 6 notes up from the Mixolydian would be 3.5 modal half steps up. If we start on the Aeolian, we land in the ocean. It's been AD plus modal range, landed us in the Dorian Ocean. That would be a 6 to a 2.5 modal range. In other words, if I go 6 notes up from the Aeolian, it would be 3.5 modal half steps. Locrian, however, this is where Locrian is crazy. It works. We land on a continent. That would be an NY modal range, a 7-4 modal range, landing us on the Lydian continent if I go 6 up from the Locrian continent. So that means if I go 6 up from the Locrian node, it would be 4 modal half steps, which would be the 5th scale degree. So the same distance here, but it would be 4 modal half steps up, 5th scale degrees from the Locrian. Same distance, but it would be 3 modal half steps up, or an augmented 4th from, so it'd be a flat 5th over here and an augmented 4th over there. Okay. Enough on that. Let's go to the next one. That's going to be, how many steps up are we at now? 7 steps up. That's going to be a very stable distance. It's going to be a color of azure. So this deep azure blue is going to be very stable, similar to the one we had up top. So if we go from most places, most continents, and we go up 7, we land at another continent most of the time. So if I go up 7 from the Ionian, it's going to land me on the Mixolydian, an IX modal range, a 1-5 modal range. In other words, if I go 7 notes up from the Ionian, it would be 4 modal half steps up, which would be a 5th scale degree, which we call a perfect 5th. A D, if I start from the Dorian, go 7 up, we land on the Aeolian, DA modal range, 2-6 modal range, 7 notes away from the Dorian, 4 modal half steps up, which would be the 5th scale degree or perfect 5th. If I start on the Phrygian, I'm good. I land on the Locrian, PN modal range, 3-7 modal range. Going up 7 from the Phrygian will be 4 modal half steps up, 5th scale degree, which would be a perfect 5th. If I start on the Lydian and I go up 7, it would be a YI modal range, a 4-1 modal range. 7 notes up from the Lydian would be 4 modal half steps up or 5th scale degree. On the Mixolydian, I'd land on the Dorian, XD modal range, 5-2 modal range, 7 notes up from the Mixolydian, 4 modal half steps, which would be the 5th scale degree. If I go from the Aeolian, I'm good. Be an AP modal range, landing on the Phrygian, a 6-3 modal range, meaning 7 notes up from the Aeolian, 4 modal half steps, which would be 5th scale degree, which would be a perfect 5th. But Locrian is crazy, because if I go from here, it's the only one where you land in the ocean. If you go to be an NY plus, landing in the Lydian Ocean modal range, 7 to a 4.5, which would be 7 notes up from the Locrian, which would be a 4.5 modal half steps, meaning a flat 5, flat 5th. All right, if we go then to the next one, we're going 8 steps up. That's usually going to be a minor distance in more of the minor modes, so that's going to be the idea. So if I start on the Ionian, which is a major, then it's going to land me in the ocean. It's going to be going from I to X plus with a Mixolydian ocean, a 1 to a 5.5 modal range, which is going to be 8 notes away from the Ionian, 4.5 modal half steps, which would be 5.5 scale degrees if we had scale degrees, right? But it's going to be a minor 6. So we have the DA. So if I start on the Dorian, again, you would think it would be good because the Dorian's a minor mode, but this is where the minor mode differs from the main minor, the Aeolian. Still lands us in the ocean if I go 8 up from the Dorian, DA plus modal range in the Aeolian Ocean. So it'd be a 2 to a 6.5 modal range, meaning if I go 8 notes up from the Dorian, it's going to be 4.5 modal half steps, which would be a 5.5 scale degrees, or in essence, a 6th. It should be a 6, right? So a minor 6, right? So we have a PI. If I go from the Phrygian, which is a minor mode, it's as we would expect, landing us on a continent of Ionian, PI modal range, a 3-1 modal range, going 8 notes up from the Phrygian would be 5 modal half steps up, which would be a 6 scale degree, a minor 6. So if we go from the Lydian, it's a major mode. That's going to be a problem. So it's going to land us in the ocean, Ionian Ocean. It's going to be a YI plus modal range, a 4 to a 1.5 modal range, meaning we go 8 notes up from the Lydian, which would be 4.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 5.5 scale degrees. It's actually a minor 6, right? So then if you go from the next one, the Mixolydian, it's going to be a problem because it's a major mode. So it lands us in the Dorian Ocean. It's an XD plus modal range, 5 to a 2.5 modal range. It's going to be 8 notes up from the Mixolydian, 4.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 5.5 from a scale degree, or the 6th. So Aeolian lands us on a continent because it's a minor mode, and 8 or grape is a minor distance. So if we go, then that would be AY modal range, landing us on the Lydian node, 6-4 modal range, 8 notes up from the Aeolian, 5 modal half steps, which would be a 6th scale degree, or minor 6. Locrian is kind of like a minor, but it has a flat 5. So it got kicked out of the club, but it's still mainly minor. That would be an NX modal range, landing us on the Mixolydian node, 7-5 modal range. It's going to be 8 notes away from the Locrian node, 5 modal half steps, which would be 6 scale degree, minor 6. All right, what if I go 9 up? That's going to be fuchsia. So all of these are going to be fuchsia, and it's going to normally be a major distance is the norm. So starting from the Aeolian, or the Ionian, you'd expect to land on a continent, which you do. The Aeolian, an IA modal range, a 1-6 modal range, 9 notes away from the Ionian node, 5 modal half steps, which would be 6 scale degree, or a major 6. Dorian is a minor mode, which you would expect to land in the ocean, but this is where the Dorian is different once again from the main minor, the Aeolian. So it lands you on a continent. Because we saw up above, it's actually, this one doesn't land, this one doesn't, this one does land you on a continent. So it'd be a D-N modal range, a 2-7 modal range, 9 notes away from the Dorian node, 5 modal half steps, which would be a 6 scale degree, a major 6th, even though it's in a minor mode. And then you have the Phrygian, which is a minor that conforms this time. So it lands you in the ocean, as you would expect, because this is a major distance applied to a minor starting point. That's a Pi plus modal range landing in the Ionian Ocean, 3 to a 1.5 modal range, 9 notes away from the Phrygian node, 5.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 6.5 scale degrees. It's going to be a major 6. So now we have from the Lydian, which is a major mode, you'd think we'd be good here, which we are. It lands us in the Dorian Ocean if I go 9 up. So it'd be a YD modal range. Lydian to the Dorian, 4-2 modal range, 9 notes up from the Lydian would be 5 modal half steps up, 6 scale degree, which would be the major 6. The Mixolydian you'd think would be good, which we are because it's a major mode. XP modal range lands us on the Phrygian continent, 5-3 modal range, 9 notes away from the Mixolydian node would be 5 modal half steps up, the 6th scale degree, which would be a major 6. Aeolian, you'd think we wouldn't be good because this is a major distance applied to a minor mode, and that is the case here. Lands us in the Lydian Ocean. It's going to be an AY plus modal range, a 6 to a 4.5 modal range, 9 notes away from the Aeolian node, 5.5 modal half step, which you would think would be 6.5 on the scale degree. It's going to be a major 6. Locrian, kind of like a minor mode, so you'd think there'd be a problem, which there is, lands us in the Mixolydian Ocean. An N to an X plus modal range, 7 to 5.5 modal range, 9 notes away from the Locrian node, 5.5 modal half steps, which would be 6.5 scale degrees, or a major 6. Next, we're going to go then to the next one, which is fuchsia. I think, did I get the color right? The last one should have been orchid. It should have been orchid. And now we're on fuchsia. I hope I got the color right. I'm going to have to put a note in there. So all of these are going to be fuchsia. So fuchsia is 10 away, and that's a minor distance typically. So you would think from the Ionian it's going to be a problem. It is. It lands us in the Aeolian Ocean, an I to an A plus modal range, a 1 to a 6.5 modal range, 10 notes up from the Ionian, 5.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 6.5 scale degrees. It's actually going to be a minor 7. So a D, Dorian, minor mode, you'd think we're good. We are. So that's going to be a DI modal range, lands us on the Ionian Ocean or the Ionian continent. It's going to be a D1 modal range, 10 notes away from the Dorian, 6 modal half steps, 7 scale degrees, you would think then, which would be a minor 7. If you start on the Phrygian, we're good because 10 is a minor mode, lands you on the Dorian continent. Be a PD modal range of 3-2 modal range, 10 notes away from the Phrygian node, 6 modal half steps, which would be 7 scale degree or minor 7. If you start on a Lydian, problem, because Lydian's a major mode, lands you in the Dorian Ocean, a YD plus modal range, 4 to a 2.5 modal range. It's going to be 10 notes away from the Lydian node, 5.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 6.5 from a scale degree standpoint, which is really going to be a minor 7, right? I'm good. Minor 7. And now we're on the mixed Lydian, which is a minor mode. So no, it's not a minor mode. It's a major mode, but we're still good because it's the bluesy mode. So it's cool with this interval, even though it's a minor interval, which is going to be an XY modal range, landing us in the Lydian continent, a 5-4 modal range, 10 notes away from the mixed Lydian node, 6 modal half steps, which would be 7 scale degree, which would be a minor 7. Aeolian minor mode, so we should be good here, which we are. Lands us on the Mixolydian continent. AX modal range, a 6-5 modal range, 10 notes away from the Aeolian node, 6 modal half steps, which would be 7 scale degree or minor 7. Locrian, also kind of minorish, so you think we're good. We are good. It's going to land you on the Aeolian. It's going to be an NA modal range, a 7-6 modal range, 10 notes away from the Locrian node, 6 modal half steps, which would be 7 scale degrees or minor 7. And then finally, we go to the 11 distance, which is going to be punch. So, and that's going to be a major distance typically. So from the Ionian, you'd think we'd be good, which we are, lands you on the Locrian IN modal range, 1-7 modal range, 11 notes away from the Ionian node, 6 modal half steps, which would be 7 scale degrees or major 7. Dorian, minor mode, you'd think we'd not good, which we aren't, because it lands you in the Ionian Ocean. D to the I plus modal range, 2 to 1.5 modal range, 11 notes away from the Dorian node, 6.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 7.5 scale degrees. It's in essence a major 7. If you're on the Phrygian, again, problem, minor mode, major distance. So it lands you in the Dorian Ocean. So it's going to be a P to a D plus modal range, 3 to a 2.5 modal range, 11 notes away from the Phrygian node, 6.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 7.5 scale degrees, which is actually a major 7. So Lydian is going to be a major mode. So you think we're good. We are good. It's going to land you on the Phrygian continent. It's going to be a YP modal range, a 4-3 modal range, 11 notes away from the Lydian node, 6 modal half steps, which would be 7 scale degree or major 7. If you're on the Mixolydian, you'd think you'd be good because it's a major mode, but we're not because it's bluesy. So it has a minor distance here. So that lands you in the Lydian Ocean. That's going to be an XY plus modal range, a 5 to a 4.5 modal range, 11 notes away from the Mixolydian node, 6.5 modal half steps, 7.5 from a scale degree standpoint, or major 7. So what if we have the Aeolian? That's a minor mode. It's going to cause us a problem because it's a major distance. It is. It's going to land us in the Mixolydian Ocean, an AX plus modal range, 6 to a 5.5, 11 notes away from the Aeolian node, 6.5 modal half steps, 7.5 scale degrees is what you would think. It's going to be a major 7. Locrian, also a problem because it's kind of like a minor mode. It is a problem, lands us in the Aeolian Ocean. In A plus modal range, 7 to a 6.5 modal range, 11 notes away from the Locrian node, 6.5 modal half steps, which would be 7.5 scale degrees, which would be a major 7. Okay, that's the heart of it, which again, we can use those distances for no matter what as permanent distances, or what you might call local distances, as though you're going around the track. But you could go up 12. Now, if I went up another distance, another one up, now I went a distance of 12. Now, again, just like we saw in the color, you could be saying, well, that means that I went around the circle, and that's equivalent to not going anywhere. And I just call it the same color, flame. So I could just use this color up here to label this note. Or I can make it a shade lighter. I'm still going to call it flame, but a shade lighter so that I can take octaves into my color. Now also note with this naming convention, you could call it a perfect eighth, right? Which kind of makes sense. Most people kind of see the perfect eighth and are like, oh, okay, that makes sense because we end the scale oftentimes by closing it out. But most people don't really see that as they carry it forward to like a major 10 or something like that. So that's not really the most practical or functional way to do it. To name it, it's nicer typically to say that I'm going to give you the distance in notes so that I give you the fact that it's going to be an octave higher than what you would think, right? So you might say it's going to be 0 plus 12 or 0 plus an octave away, perfect first. That's what I would like to call it, right? So in other words, if I went 13 up, it's an octave up. The local distance would be a major second, which would be just 1, right? The local distance would be 1. But I'd like to say it's going to be 1 plus 12 or 1 plus an octave minor second, not a major second, minor second. And that's still going to be amber, but a shade lighter. And then we've got 14, which is going to be, if you say 14 minus 12 is 2, so it'd be a 2 note away major second for the local distance, which would be chartreuse. So I'm still going to call it chartreuse, but a shade lighter. Now, if you take into consideration octaves in something like a fretboard, you can see already without octaves, this one doesn't have octaves, and it's already has a lot of information in it. So if you add octaves, it's gonna add a whole lot more information. So oftentimes it's useful, like this one has octaves, and you can see it has a lot more shading involved here. So it's going to get a lot more busy looking and a lot more difficult to manage than just listing out the local distances. But sometimes that's what you want to focus on. So it is possible to do that. And I'm hoping, and I hope that we'll be able to make a project to build out in Excel a system that you can go through all 12 collections of 7 notes, listing the distances with various names so that you can practice the names and show them with color variation. So you can easily see the patterns in color variation. All right, but if we were to do it this way, then we have the same kind of idea here, of course. This would be the II mode. I would call the distance II plus 12, meaning we're on the same point. We went around the lap, but that's the local distance is 0, and then I'm going to add 12, meaning it's an octave up. So it's the same flame color, but an octave lighter. And the distances similarly will be managed here by saying, I want to keep the second number the local distance because it's easier to do, just like with the scale degrees, but add the first number of total distance, which I can say by either saying it's 0 plus 12 or 0 plus an octave, or give the total distance of 12 in this case. Or for here, for example, I could say this is going to be 1 local distance plus 12 Ionian, right? Or this one is a 2 local distance plus 12 Ionian first modal half step, which would be a second scale degree, or just a 14 Ionian first modal half step. And that allows me to keep the local distance, the second number, the same, which I think kind of gives the flavor for most people, but also giving the first number. And from a color standpoint, once again, I could use the same colors of just chartreuse in this case, or if I want to give that dimension of an octave up, if I'm working on like inverse intervals on my fretboard, then I might want to use a fretboard that has this shade lighter, which gives me the ability to look at different inversions, right? So then if I go up the other way, similarly, the scale degrees kind of fall apart when you go backwards. So if I go, because most of the scale degrees are designed for local distances, basically, going clockwise. So if I go counterclockwise, you notice we have a problem here, because if you drop the notes, then what you have, when you go up this way and I drop the notes, my only option to tell you that there's a difference between this minor third and this minor third is to say this one is going to be a minor 9, right? 7 or a minor 10, right? And a major 10 so I'd have to keep on counting up, which is kind of, again, not what I see functionally happening for most people. So I'd rather add the notes. But if I go backwards, even if I use that system, I can't really go backwards with that system because the problem is I started on 1. So what would I call this? You would think if I go back 1, it would be like a negative second, right? But I can't because I didn't start on 0. I started on 1. So from a practical standpoint, I think when you go backwards, if using the normal interval convention, you add the distance in notes if you want to add the dimension of notes. You're going to say, I went back 1, which has a local distance of going forward or clockwise 11. I'm still going to call it a major 7. I'm not going to try to call it it's a negative major first, because then you're going to end up with a whole nother set of negative or counterclockwise distances, and they don't line up well because instead of starting at 0, they started at 1. All right, so I would start to remember that the major 7 is either 11 forward or negative 1 back, counterclockwise. Similarly, if I go 2 back, I'm going to, of course, have the color equivalent to going forward of 10, which was fuchsia, but it's going to be a shade darker. So that means a minor 7 could be 10 forward or 2 back. If I go 2 back, I'm going to see that as going, it's kind of like an inverse, right? But I'm going in the opposite direction. So it's going to be an octave lower or darker represented. If I go 3 back, then that would be equivalent to going 9 forward, 12 minus 3. So the major 6 could be 9 forward or 3 back. If I go 4 back, 12 minus 4 would be 8. So that's going to be purple. So we have purple or grape, and that's going to be negative 4 minor 6. And then if I go negative 5 back, that would be like going 7 forward. So that was azure, blue, the stable distance. So a perfect fifth could be 7 forward or 5 back. And then the diminished, this is the crazy tritone. So I'm still going to call it normally a diminished fifth, or it could be an augmented fourth. but I'm going to keep that same name, diminished fifth or augmented fourth, going forward, which is the tritone electric sky. That's the one that'll electrocute you 6, no matter what, if you're going backwards or forward, problem one, or the crazy one. If I go -7, 12 minus 7 would be 5 forward. That would be aqua. So now we have aqua, a shade darker. So -7 could be a perfect fourth, or a perfect fourth could be 5 forward. If I go -8, 12 minus 8 would be 4. So that's going to be then our mint. So the major third could be 4 forward or -8 backwards. -9, 12 minus 9 is 3, which is going to be our lime color. So that means that we could go forward 3 or backwards -9 to be a minor third. -10 minus 10 minus 12 is going to be 2. So that would be 2 note away major second, or chartreuse color. And so that means the major second could also be -10 backwards, 11 backwards. 12 minus 11 would be 1 forward, which was amber. So now we've got the 1 note away minor second could be 1 clockwise or forward, or 11 counterclockwise or backwards. And then again, we can go another octave down and similarly represent that with another shade down in tone of color. Okay, on our system going backwards, our system makes more sense going backwards because we started at 0, right? We started at the Ionian 0. So if I went from the Ionian and I went 1 step back, I can just say that it's going to be -1 from the Ionian node, which I'm not going to put another negative because I don't want to have repeat negatives, but I'm just going to keep calling it a negative first modal half step, right? And now each of these can be flipped because you could just take the inverse and say, well, what if I went clockwise around the circle? 12 minus 1 would be 11 forward, and 7 minus 1 would be 6 forward. So see how this is symmetrical. This makes sense because if I start on the Ionian node, if I think about it as a circle, I can go 1 step backwards in the 12-step circle, or I can go 1 step backwards in the 7-step circle, which would be equivalent to going 11 steps clockwise in the 12-step circle, or 6 steps clockwise in the 12-step circle, right? So the same, but it's going to be the same color representing 1 step back, which was punch. So then here, if I go 2 steps back, then same idea, it's going to be -2 from the Ionian node, second -1.5 modal half steps. If I go 3 steps back, it's going to be grape, but a shade darker. So it'd be -2 notes back from the Ionian, -3 notes back from the Ionian, -2 modal half steps. 12 minus 3 is gonna be 9, and 7 minus 2 is 5. So if I go down here, it'd be a 9 note away. Ionian 5 is grape in the local distance, and then this one is grape up here. So obviously, again, it makes sense if you just think about each of these numbers going clockwise or counterclockwise around, this circle, then it makes sense, right? And of course, I can compound that to the next octave up and have a similar kind of idea up here, which we talked about in prior presentations. I don't want to get into it in too much detail now, particularly on a guitar where we don't have as much distance going in the negative direction as possibly on the piano. But you have the same logic, of course, plays out if we go another octave back, and we could add the color system. So the bottom line is, we could use a color system for a distance as though we're going around a clock, local distances clockwise around the track, or we can add the dimension of color, which is going to make our tools, like a fretboard, much more complex, but could be useful complexity when we're practicing inversions and things like that.